feeling ever save you? I went to hospital with shortness of breath and my heart racing. They did a chest x-ray, blood test for blood clots, and a few other tests, but all came back normal. After observing me overnight, everything still looked good, oxygen saturation was perfect, my heart rate was still a bit elevated but nothing too crazy, and it seemed that it was likely leftover symptoms from a bad virus that I'd had a week or so earlier. The ER doctor asks me how I would feel if they sent me home, and I just had a bad feeling about it all. I told him as such, and that I had no real basis for it except that I just felt off about it. He said fair enough, let's try one more test, and if that comes back negative then we'll send you up to general medicine and see if they can track something down. That test was a VQ scan that found, despite all other tests showing no results for blood clots, I actually had a whole bunch of them in both lungs. I ended up with a diagnosis of unprovoked bilateral pulmonary embolisms and am on blood thinners for life. Super grateful both for the bad feeling and the ER doctor who was willing to listen to it. I was learning violin when I was about 10 from an instructor at my local music shop. I got the weirdest feeling from him even though he didn't do anything out of the ordinary. I wanted to vomit every time I looked at him, especially his hands. After 4 lessons I told my parents that I had a terrible feeling about him and I never wanted to go back. Luckily, they listened and didn't make me ever go to him again. A few years later he was arrested for molesting multiple of his students. I have no idea how I knew something was off. He never did or said anything, but I just felt it. Last year, December 1st. I had slept for almost a week trying to fight what I thought was the flu. Woke up and that exact gut feeling kept on telling me something's not right with me. Called the parents to tell them and then cabbed myself to the emergency room. Took blood, the whole 9 yards, was there for 8 hours. Discharged and sent home. Called the next morning asking me to come back because they found something in my blood. Bacteremia and endocarditis. I was put on penicillin immediately, for 2 months. More tests, more things wrong. Went for a specialized test on December 21st, woke up to them telling me I need surgery as soon as possible. They're trying to find a surgical team, earliest is the 24th. I go in and while they're operating I have an ascending aortic aneurysm and it caused an aortic dissection. They're able to fix it. I've got a synthetic valve in there now. Here's the kicker. I work in a restaurant kitchen, just before the start of the holiday season. Normally most cooks would tough it out and just work. Most think, it happens and it'll get better soon. Just keep going. There was just something about the way I was feeling this time that made me go to the hospital. I'm told that if I had done that, I more than likely would have died before my birthday and they would have found out about the aneurysm during the autopsy. That still sends fucking chills down my spine. My best friend works as an emergency room nurse at the same hospital that I was operated on, and she was freaking out internally but kept it together on the outside for me. She explained just how serious this all was after I was in recovery. I've promised to tell her whenever I get that same feeling again. TL, doctor, gut told me to go to the hospital. If I hadn't I would have been dead 3 weeks later. Cheers. Edit, I've got to get to work now, but I'll try to answer more replies during the day. Please keep them coming so others can learn from my mistake and fortunes. Thank you. Edit 2, thank you kind stranger for the silver. I still don't know what to do with it, but I wish one back to you, smiley face. Edit 3, WFT. 6k upvotes on a post that I made about my heart. Thank you all for all the concern and wishes. Seeing the conversation this has produced has helped a lot with just my general well-being and mental health. Truly moved by this, smiling face with hearts. There's a very fun road that gets you from Niedendorf to Wack, or back, in Germany. You can go 50 or 60 clicks along smooth tight turns and little rolling hills. All around it for acres and acres are fields of whatever's in season and no intersections for several kilometers. It's a very fun road to go too fast on. This day, something like wheat was in and it was high. I couldn't see around the corners, but I knew the road well and was staying in my lane. And I was going fast, and smiling. About halfway in, I heard a voice in my head as clear as if the speaker were sitting next to me, and it said, "You need to slow down." It was startling and I braked immediately. 2 seconds later I come through one of the turns and into the ass end of a combine, taking up both lanes and moving slowly. I barely stopped in time. Those extra 2 seconds of brake time saved a Volvo at least, but I'm pretty sure they saved my life too. Not mine, but my dad's. I was downstairs helping him with some woodworking when I was 10 or 11. He went to run a 2x4 through the table saw when he noticed I was at his elbow rather than behind him. He stopped and told me to never stand behind a board when it's going through the saw in case it gets thrown. I thought he was being overly cautious and I didn't have as good of a view from behind him, but whatever, I got behind him. He flipped on the saw and ran the board through. He only got 1/3 of the way through, though, when the blade hit a knot and flung the 2x4 hard enough to crash against the wall 10 feet behind. If I hadn't moved, it would have hit me square in the chest and could have killed me. Wife called me while I was at work, just to say she was home from her night shift and planning to go to bed. She had worked night shift for years and never called me just to say she was home and going to bed before. She also sounded weirdly detached on the call. I asked her if she was okay, she said yes, just really sleepy. I got a weird feeling and told her I was going to leave work and come home. She told me I didn't need to. I said okay, and then I left work and rushed home anyway. Found a suicide note taped to the garage door. I got to her in time, rushed her to the ER, and got her the help she needed. A week of inpatient psych, followed by changes to medications and doctors. This was about 5 months ago, and she is so much better now. I used to just drive around country roads when I would feel stressed out or sad as a way to just get away and listen to music. One evening I was driving with my best friend in the car and we're on a gravel road that has a huge hill. We were driving towards the sunset, but it was winter and the light was fading fast. As the car started down the hill, I had this moment where I thought to myself my brights should be on, and I flicked them on, and at the bottom of this super steep hill stood 6 deer on the road. I slammed on the brakes and the car turned sideways and skidded to a stop like 4 feet from the deer. Those stupid deer didn't even move. They just stared into the passenger side of my car, and my best friend pointed at them and said, "Hey, dear." The car was fine, we were fine, and Bambi was all good. I don't drive around like that anymore. Not me, but my science teacher. When she was a teenager, she was standing near some lights at a pedestrian crossing with her and her friend. Very chill, but out of nowhere she had this gut feeling that both of them had to move. They moved, just a couple meters away, and the next moment a car had hit another car and had hit one of the street electricity utility poles, and it had fell and exploded. Minor explosion enough distance away that it didn't hurt the girls, exactly where they were. One of the wires had also snapped and hit it exactly where they were standing as well. They basically were in a scene of car wreckage and snapped wires and electricity explosions and the pole collapse. Just real insane. If the pole had missed them, the wire would have hit them, and if not that, then most likely the cars. That gut feeling of moving away saved both of them. I remember this story so clearly from high school science class because it was such a WTF, pity I only paid attention to these things and not actually science, hee hee. I woke up from a deep sleep at like 2 a.m. during a winter storm. Something wasn't right. I immediately went looking for my senior dog and couldn't find her anywhere in the house. My roommates had a tendency to let her out for a walk and forget about her, closing the door. I ran to the front of the house and found her laying on the welcome mat. She was hardly breathing and covered in snow. She had been outside alone for at the very least 5 hours. I moved out shortly after.